Alright guys, well, we're back here again. We're at the halfway point of the series now, and I just wanted to thank you so much again for giving us so much support on the first half of the series. It's really awesome, and we're super happy that you guys are enjoying everything we're doing so far. We're going to have plenty of other big projects coming up in the coming weeks after we're done with this series, but we really appreciate all the continued support you've been giving. And with that being said, we hope you continue to enjoy the back half of this series that we're doing. And don't forget, of course, to subscribe, share, and also check out our website, Bad Apples Anime Reviews, WordPress.com. It's going to be in the description as always. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's get underway. So, episode 4 of Fooly Cooly is titled Full Swing. Its Japanese release was on October 25th, 2000, and its Toonami release was on August 8th, 2003. Something interesting to note is episode 3 and 4 came out back-to-back days on Toonami back in 2003 as they were celebrating the show's release. Just something interesting to note. Another big thing to note about this episode in particular is the changing of directors. So Fooly Cooly's two main directors are Masahiko Otsuka and Shoji Seiki, with Shoji Seiki doing the first 3 episodes, while Masahiko Otsuka takes over from here in episode 4 to the end of the series. And you could tell with him, he is a much more in-depth storyteller than Shoji Seiki, who is much more about the upbeat action of the series.
Haruko proves to be a star baseball player with phenomenal hitting and pitching skills, nearly single-handedly defeating the Mabase Martians, who are coached by Naota's grandfather, Shigekune. Naota, however, is ignorant of the game and gets hit by one of Haruko's pitches. At home, Kamon and Haruko indulge in odd behavior that raises Naota's jealousy. He meets Commander Amuro for the first time, who warns him about Haruko. The commander also works for the Bureau of Interstellar Immigration alongside his subordinate, Lieutenant Kitsurubami. His whole squad discovers that a satellite is damaged by one of Haruko's baseballs, rapidly falling towards Earth. It hones in on a sudden burst of light from the channel in Naota's head that's triggered by his anger towards his father, targeting Mabase. Naota confronts his father and nearly attacks him with his baseball bat, discovering that his father's been replaced by a robot. He finds the decaying, dried-up body of his real father, but quickly revives him with hot water. After receiving a message that Commander Amuro had asked Naota to pass on to her, Haruko takes Naota to the top of the medical mechanical plant, where she extracts a Gibbon Flying V guitar from his head, which she calls his bat. She then leaves as the falling satellite heads straight for Naota. It unfolds into the shape of a baseball glove and launches a bomb that looks exactly like a baseball. Naota swings his bat and manages to halt the bomb, which begins to detonate. Haruko returns to rescue him by swinging her guitar and knocking it back into space, and the two of them get to drive away from the scene, Naota finally successful.
The title Full Swing actually really is a perfect way to describe what this episode is all about. This episode is the real kicking off of the story, which is kind of wild to say considering at this point you're already halfway through the series. But this episode really unravels a lot more of the in-depth story of Fooly Cooly. While Fooly Cooly normally up to this point was just, it felt very self-contained, and besides the characters coming back every episode, you could argue it was a episodic series. This, however, is the point in the series where everything from the first 3 episodes really starts to intertwine and creates this really elaborate, beautiful story that we know. In this section of the video in particular, I really want to get a little more personal, as this episode hits some really tough issues, things that we all have dealt with. The idea of not being able to live up to people's expectations, or even your own. It's something that everyone, including me personally, has probably felt some point or another. And how it's portrayed in this episode, for the first time you really get something guttural, something that feels real in such a fantastical series. Everything from his own grandfather mentioning he's swinging his brother's bat, however, failing to do so, as well as living in the shadow of now more than just his brother, but also Haruko, And while the scene at the beginning of the episode is played for a very light-hearted nature, it turns quickly into a desperate situation of Naota trying to have some self-realization and purpose. And those are the kind of moments in Fooly Cooly that really make it one of our favorites. It's a series that's able to blend really heartfelt and emotional topics to talk about, but also do it in the way where you're always entertained, and it does it very naturally. Another thing I wanted to mention in this episode in particular is the evolution of Naota's thought process. You could see in the early half of the episode, he is filled with a complete sense of jealousy between his father now hitting on Haruko, which turns into some sort of romantic interest from Naota, while also being completely envious of everyone around him, to by the end of the episode starting to really fight for himself. And Haruko, unironically, as we learn later, is really pulling a lot of the strings for Naota, and ultimately is trying to help him realize his own self-worth, while also using him for, well, her own means and ideas, which we'll get to that later. An interesting character that gets introduced in this episode in particular is Commander Amaro of the Interstellar Immigration Department. Funny enough, this character is also known as Eyebrows by the community, and you can see why. His dynamic and entry into the series once again reconfirms the real plot of this story, which is ultimately the almost angel and devil nature that him and Haruko take onto Naota, with the commander ultimately really showing Naota some of the flaws that are in his life and trying to really steer him onto the right path, while also trying to prevent Haruko and her ideals. I find it really interesting that two characters that feel so drastically different are trying to do the same thing for Naota, however, doing it in two completely different means. With that being said, though, his character really is one of the few almost weak points of the series, as the character brings a lot of intrigue and really becomes a guidance figure for Naota, while with Haruko becoming more and more reckless. They don't do enough with him, and it's one of the few things that really missed for me in Fooly Cooly. And while his character still ended up being a good character, ultimately I feel like they needed to introduce him earlier, as there is only 6 episodes, to really create that dichotomy a little better.
From my perspective, there's this really weird juxtaposition between how things perform animation-wise and through the cinematic standpoint in this episode. Through the animation and art style, you can clearly still tell that this is Fooly Cooly, but at the same time, certain things that happen are unlike what have come in the previous episodes. There's some really grotesque imagery that happens within this episode alone that really makes it stand out from the previous 3 episodes, just because of how out of place it feels with the rest of the series, at least before this point. If you were watching this episode first out of everything else, with completely no context at all, you would probably think this is just a scary horror anime. But in reality, this is actually just an experimentation that comes with having a new director on board. And some of the out of place imagery actually makes sense in a series like this, where not everything is as it seems. The first instance of this natural occurrence doesn't actually happen until after Haruko and Naota get home. She tries to encourage him to focus on his swing, but he wants nothing to do with the game or the discussion of baseball in the first place. And out of nowhere, you just see this really creepy imagery of heads just popping up out of nowhere, within Haruko's arms dropping onto the pavement, and even Haruko popping up behind Naota, even though she's supposed to be standing right in front of him. They kinda act like blink and you miss it moments, but they're right in front of your face. It gets more intense when you jump to the middle point of the episode, where the animators really start to take advantage of sort of the flash smash cutting style that was seen in episode 2. Both instances pretty much occur within Naota's mindset, like we're trying to get an insight of how messed up the NO channel opening in his mind might have made his thought process. Before, he probably would have been able to convey his thoughts pretty clearly and concisely, unlike an actual adult in this town. But now, since so many beings have popped out of his forehead, it's like his mind struggles to focus on one thought at a time. When Mott talks about the culmination of the past 3 episodes happening in this episode, it's partially due to the menacing imagery of Naota's cat. The mental image of Haruko in Naota's mind is actually a mouse, a pure contrast as to how Naota was supposed to be playing a cat in his school play in the previous episode. Even as she winds up getting her head clawed completely off her body due to Naota's cat. She reminds Naota that you have to be the mouse and the cat eventually in order to take your shot and swing the bat. From what I can tell, this really isn't unlike anything you'd probably see from the Evangelion franchise, and Mott can definitely attest to that. And seeing the horrific sight of Naota's father all shriveled and decaying, withering away, makes me believe that we're really past the point of no return in this series.
Swinging the bat. It's something that obviously the title itself mentions, however it's something that is one of the most analyzed aspects of Fooly Cooly is this single line. Its meaning has been interpreted several different ways by all sorts of people who watch it, but when you really look at this episode, swinging the bat is ultimately the idea is that if you want something, or if you don't think you can do something, all you can do at the end of the day is try your best. And we see this come to fruition. The whole episode, people mention to Naota that he needs to swing the bat. From Haruko to who we're just going to refer as Eyebrows from now on, it's just easier to say. And even towards the very end of the episode, when you literally have the end of the world facing Naota, the idea of swinging the bat is to be able to go into impossible, unthinkable odds with everything stacked against you and still give it your absolute all and best effort. And that's really the message behind this episode. And something I noticed with the back half of Fooly Cooly compared to the front half, with the first half of Fooly Cooly, the meanings are much more complex. They're not as surface level, which really was great. It was a lot more interpretation of what the episode is trying to get across than these back episodes. These back episodes have that complexity still, but ultimately, it's much easier to grab the message. Some people are going to look at that as a positive or a negative. I don't look at it here or there. But I wanted to mention this because you can clear as day see that the message is to do your best and never be scared to take that risk. And that swinging of the bat at the end of the episode for Naota is him showing that he's willing to do whatever it takes to succeed or be something in this world. And it was a big moment, and it's one of the biggest and definitely most standout moments for this entire series. As with every episode of Fooly Cooly February so far, of course we can't talk about any episode of Fooly Cooly without talking about the Pillow song. And throughout the series we've been talking about our favorite song in each episode, and this episode is no different. However, I'm going to mix it up just a little bit. A lot of people naturally are going to go with Crazy Sunshine, as that's the song that plays during the climax when he swings the bat. However, I'm going to go and mix things up just a little bit. I want to go with Beautiful Morning with You. And here's my reasoning why. Beautiful Morning with You in this episode and how it's used is so effective, as it's really conveying Naota's, he's depressed. His conversation with Eyebrows kind of starts getting him back on the right path a bit. And ultimately, while he wants to do better, the song kind of shows you that swing of things. And I think while Crazy Sunshine obviously is going to be the more remembered track from this episode, the use of Beautiful Morning with You was much more effective for me, and especially on subsequent viewings compared to my first watch through.
My selection actually comes right after Beautiful Morning with You during the scene where Naota's actually finding out that his father's a robot and eventually finding the real version of him in a cupboard. It's a track called Come Down that starts with a nice easygoing guitar riff before really amping things up. It's timed well with the scene just because you can actually feel the sense of urgency that goes through Naota's mind. He's just now realizing that his dad's been on the brink of death this whole time, so now he's doing everything he can in his power to save him. Even the animation starts to change slightly just a little bit with it, between the morphing of the scenery and through the flash cuts of Mamimi on top of Kanti. It really feels like a precursor as to what's eventually going to be coming with Crazy Sunshine in the climax. And plus, I don't want to prove Mott right by actually picking Crazy Sunshine, so I'm going to stick with this.
Overall, episode 4 for me is definitely one of the most important episodes of Fooly Cooly. Between the tonal shift, the overall design and direction that's taken because of a different director, and really the unraveling and simplification of a complex story, so by the end of it, everyone's going to know what happened, roughly at least. It fits really well, and it was a great episode to kind of shift to that tone, that we're starting to get more serious, that the plot is really building to its climax. And it's so important for a series to leave an impact on you. This episode in particular left a bigger impact on me than any of the other episodes before it. And for a 6-episode miniseries to impact so many people in such a way, you need to have these kind of episodes. When the series is done and we go to give our final thoughts, expect me to talk a lot about this episode. Simply put, it's beautiful. Alrighty guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. We're on the home stretch now, everyone. Really can't thank you guys enough. I don't want to sound too much like a broken record, but obviously we're still trying to grow everything out, and you guys have been really supportive, and we really appreciate it. Of course, if you want to continue supporting, don't be scared to hit the like button. Share us around. It's a big one, too. Click on the subscribe button, but also check out our website, too. It's going to be in the link in the description below. And until next episode, we'll see you next time.
When you see a John Woo film, it's comforting to know how shallow the world really is. Next on Footy Cootie, Episode 5, Brittle Bullet. It takes an idiot to do cool things. That's why it's cool.